What is going on, everybody? I am back today to talk about the third installment in the Wreck series. Yes, these movies have pulled me in to want to watch the entirety of the franchise. I loved the first movie. I thought it was absolutely incredible. And I thought the second film was a really great continuation of the first movie. And I know that there were two directors that worked together on the first two films. And it seems like they each took one of the third and fourth sequels. One of them has directed this one, and one of them has directed the fourth film, which I found to be really interesting. And I know reading the reviews of the third and the fourth films, they are nowhere near as highly regarded as the original two films. It seems like there's a lot that has changed about it that people don't seem to like all that much. But regardless, I thought that I would give this a watch because I had so much fun with the first two movies. And obviously, with spooky season around the corner, I'm loving watching horror movies. And so today I'm going to be talking about Rec 3 Genesis with you today. Rec 3 Genesis is directed by Paco Plaza. A pair of newlyweds must fight to survive when their wedding reception descends into chaos and carnage when their guests become infected by a virus that turns them into hungry zombies. So, I was very excited to watch this movie because, as I said, I am a huge fan of the first two films in the franchise, and this movie was so much fun. It is not anywhere near as good as the first two films. I didn't expect it to be, but what I really like is the director here takes a lot of risks and does some of what makes the first two films special, but completely changes the tone and the approach of the filmmaking and just everything about the movie to try to make something different. Which, as I've said before, in remakes or sequels, I always like it when directors are willing to take risks and do something different. And sometimes those risks don't work out to the director's benefit, but I think in this case, there's enough variation to make it a really enjoyable experience. This is not a perfect film by any means. It's incredibly flawed. There are things about it that I didn't enjoy, but I do think that it's a worthwhile entry into the franchise, and I'm excited to tell you about it today. In this film, we are dropped in to the wedding of Clara and Coldo, and they have all of their families coming to their wedding reception. So we've completely changed locations. We're not at the original apartment building anymore. And at the beginning of the film, we have the people who are filming the wedding and the camera crew that's there, and we're talking to different family members. And really early on, we are introduced to what I am assuming is the veterinarian from the first film, where the dog from the family's house that was infected went to this vet's office and bit the vet at the office, who just happens to be, I think, one of the people getting married's uncle. And we see he's got a bandage on there. So we immediately know that's how all hell is going to break loose, because he was bitten by the dog in the first movie. And so we're introduced to all of these different characters until eventually he lashes out and starts biting people at the wedding. And the husband and wife end up getting separated into two different groups of their family and friends. And the entirety of the film is the husband and wife trying to find each other again so that they can eventually escape the property and get away from these zombie like demon possessed people. So, like I said, I really enjoyed this movie a lot. I thought the performances in it were really solid. This movie takes a very comedic approach. There is a lot of like goofy comedy, whether it be the guy dressed like SpongeBob who calls himself Sponge John for copyright purposes. One of the characters in their group was literally just at the wedding for copyright issues with music. There's a lot of jokes surrounding the approach to filmmaking, which I think is the director kind of winking and nodding at the audience, which is something that I can really appreciate, especially since they're in low budget horror movie making. It was a lot of fun to hear those kind of references. There's a lot of comedy surrounding a lot of the violence in the movie, but it also takes a turn in moments and gets very dark and disturbing like the first two movies. The violence is unrelenting. There's some really great practical effects in this as well. But I think the believability of the characters is what makes it really easy to invest yourself in. There's a huge shift in this movie where at the beginning of the film it starts out found footage style, and then it completely cuts away from it and becomes just a stereotypical narrative. And at first I wasn't really on board with it. I was kind of taken aback by like, why would you do this completely differently? But once I settled into it, I didn't mind as much. I think there are moments that don't work work as well as others where I feel like if they would have stuck to the found footage format that it would have been better. But I don't really fault the director for that. It's trying something different when you've been doing more of the same for two films. And there's a moment where for some reason they cut back to the found footage style after they cut to the traditional narrative filmmaking style, which is a little bit jarring. I don't know necessarily why you would cut back in that specific instance, but they choose to do it. And like I said, for the most part, it works and it helps you be able to cover ground between where the husband is and where the wife is in specific moments. And I'm sure that's why they did it. They were trying to think about like what would be the logic of two people carrying cameras in these very specific moments. It just doesn't necessarily work to the director's advantage. I really loved the look of the possessed people in this movie, and the violence in this is some of the best in the series. There's some really cool practical kills in this movie. It's gnarly and unrelenting, and there's also something like deeply depressing about this movie where people are coming together to celebrate these two people being married, and these people who just wanted to come together for the happiest day of their lives are seeing their family members be turned into these creatures. There's like a really heartbreaking moment between the bride and one of her family members where it's just like you can see the true pain and terror on her face of like, this is my family and they're all dying. And I think that horror mixed in with the comedy, some moments it's a little absurd. Like some of the comedic beats didn't necessarily work for me, but I think that it's a nice break from just the dour and depressing for the entirety of the runtime. The ending is very dour and very depressing, and I honestly kind of commend the directors for kind of the schlock of the third act. It gets kind of the very last scene is absurd, but I like it. It's what I like about horror, where you don't have to take yourself too seriously and you can do something relatively unhinged. There's a little bit of heavy-handed exposition. There's like a couple of moments where the crux of the narrative is reliant on this priest character, and it was fine. I feel like the movie could have done without it. It feels like they try to make it really high stakes when it shifts to the narrative perspective, which like what makes the movie high stakes in the first two films is just the closed confined area and trying to find your way out, where this feels a little bit more open. They're in this building, but it's this very enormous property, and so like they're not quarantined off at the beginning of the movie. They believe there's a way out. There's people trying to run for buses and different vehicles to try to get away, and I liked that element of the film. I do think there are some pacing issues here, and the structure could have been shifted a little bit. There's a couple of moments they linger a little bit too long on that kind of pull your interest. But I think overall the movie is fun, and that's exactly what the third installment of a franchise like this should be. It should be fun. And I really enjoyed myself watching this. And I think if you watch the first two films in the franchise and you were hesitant because of reviews of this movie, just go in and expect to have a good time. It has a lot of cliches from zombie films, even though these aren't technically zombies, they're more demon possessed people, but it's still a blast to watch. And I will honestly revisit this one in the future with the first two films in the franchise. So, have you seen Rec 3 Genesis? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Leave me a comment down below and let me know what you thought. I thought this movie was a ton of fun. I loved it. I had a blast, and I will definitely watch it again. As always, if you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, helps me out a lot and lets me know the type of content you're looking for. I'm always putting out new material and look forward to getting more out for you in the near future. And as always, everyone, thank you so much for watching and have a great rest of your day.